Taylor Walker from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Shannon Hearn from the West Coast Eagles.
This is Nathan Jones from the Melbourne Football Club.
Phil Davis from the GWS Giants.
It's Brad Avery from the Port Adelaide Football Club,
and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hello, it is MJ from the Coaches Panel. Number of players already revealed in the 50 most relevant. Landing ourselves today, the number 45 player, GWS midfielder, potential breakout option. And I'm keen to get some thoughts from a fellow Coaches panelist as we talk Jacob Hopper today. Joining me on the line, I've got Jimmy. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hello, MJ. Hello, listeners.
Let's talk about Jacob Hopper, because he from junior days has shown massive fantasy potential. He's just 21 years old. He is a midfielder, but even though he's not yet maybe given people as much kind of at the elite level as they'd like to see from him, I can see enough that he could is a dangerous word in the preseason, I know, but he could be an absolute premium for us in 2019. He also could be a royal pain in your butt that only goes 90, but that's fine. Last year, his best score for both AFL Fantasy and Supercoach was against the Carlton Football Club. It was 112 in AFL Fantasy, 131 in Supercoach. Averaged high 70s across all your formats. Priced interesting enough in Supercoach, around about 430, a little bit higher in Dream Team Fantasy, and really, we'll talk about this a little bit more when it comes to it in a moment. But, Jimmy, when you're picking Jacob Hopper, you're picking him based on his price point, based on what he's averaging. You really are picking him because you're bullish that he's going to push that triple-figure mark. There are guys that are lower value that you want to get money out of and maybe similar scores. But if you're jumping on Jacob Hopper in 2019 in a salary cap, it's because you think he's going triple digits.
Yeah, look, he's at a really awkward sort of price, isn't he? He's not quite there where you can look at him and go, yep, if he doesn't quite make it, I'm at least making some good cash, because by the time your magic number comes down and everything evens itself out over the first month or so, he might well jump a bit, because, look, he's not going to go any worse than he did last year, surely, touch wood on injury. But is he going to do enough to hit the 100-point mark? I don't know. He's got that potential. As you said, he could do it, but he's an interesting one. The opportunity's certainly there for him.
Well, it is, and like we said right at the beginning of the episode, even as a junior, he was dominating games in his final season at TAC level. He averaged 23 disposals, more than half of those were contested, recorded, I think, like 7 clearances a game on average and 5 tackles. And even in his debut game in the AFL, a debut score of 97 in AFL Fantasy Dream Team, a Supercoach ton on debut. His second season, kind of interrupted by a hamstring and a finger injuries. While he did make it back in time for the Giants' preliminary final and finals run, probably the best game I've seen him play prior to 2018 was that preliminary final matchup. 13 of his 27 possessions were contested, and he certainly held his own against the eventual premiers Richmond. And then last year, 2018, that development is continuing on, a rise of 13 points in his seasonal average for Dream Team and Fantasy, a bump of 17 points in his seasonal average in Supercoach, up to 79. And it's a small sample, Jimmy. It's only a 10-week window in time. But during a 10-week window just last year, in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, he had 3 tons and averaged 87.8. While in Supercoach, during that same stretch of games, he averaged 90 with 2 tons. So he's priced probably about 10 points below that already. And I think with the departure of Dylan Shiel, there is an opportunity in that side for him and others, certainly, at the Giants, to take some extra midfield rotations, to take some extra responsibility, and in kind, for Hopper, increase his scoring.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think any of us doubt that he's going to jump up this year. It's he's certainly got all the tools to do it. He's got the opportunity there. He's a beast of a player. It's the only question mark is he going to jump enough? We look at someone like him who's priced at roughly the same as, say, Newman, who we talked about the other day.
Yeah.
Around that sort of mid-5s-ish. The difference, Newman, for him to be a keeper, only needs to average 90, 95 or so. If Hopper does the same,
that's not enough. Yeah.
Not enough. If you're picking him, you're banking on him going at a good enough click that come mid-season, he's either banked himself as a keeper, and he's improved to that extent that he's going at 105, 110, 115 or more, or you're picking him on the basis that he runs well enough that you can do a simple sideways trade to someone who's definitely a keeper but's had an off game somewhere in between to lower his price a bit. So I think, he's a fascinating study, and the real question you've got to ask yourself is, can he do enough?
Well, that is the key thing, because at junior level, he's done that. At NEFL level, he's done that. Now the opportunity for him to do it at AFL level, the opportunity is really there waiting for him. This midfield time of Dylan Shiel out, yes, he's been in the midfield the past couple of years, as has Tim Taranto. There will be guys like Caldwell and Haitley that get some extra midfield rotations, but I do think largely Hopper and to a lesser extent, Taranto will take those extra responsibility moments. He is that inside bull. As a junior, he was compared to Sydney's Josh Kennedy and Geelong's Patrick Dangerfield. Huge comparisons. But when you do watch him play, you kind of go, well, he's not that player, and comparisons are always dangerous. I get why someone would say he plays like that real bull extractor, gets the ball out, handy, with the ball, when finishing off in front of goal, certainly looks dangerous with an overhead mark. But you do make that point. The question isn't, will he go up? The question is, will he go up enough? Because we've got guys like Tom Liberatore and Dan Hanbury who are proven premiums that are priced less than he is, that could score very similar to him and make you more money. Even an Anthony Miles, who a little more less proven at AFL level, has shown at the other levels beneath and the small opportunities got at Richmond that he can score well, and he's cheaper than Jacob Hopper. So we've got this interesting dilemma, don't we, where we've got mid-price options in the midfield who are cheaper, who have done it before, who have equally the similar amount of opportunities. And so really with Hopper, it's if he doesn't go 100, even if he's close, you'd probably need to consider that a little bit of a bust move. The potential, my friends, is there, no doubt. We can see him make hundreds and solid enough hundreds too, right across the past few seasons. But he needs to go 100 for you to gain the full benefit of adding him in your side. And while he can do it, I'm not sold entirely on it just yet.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I think his ceiling is maybe the one thing that's holding him back a little bit. From a Dream Team point of view, he's hit those 130 sort of mark before in Supercoach, but he hasn't quite got there in Dream Team yet. So those, he'll be consistent. Now, you said before, he averaged 100 with only two scores, or averaged 90, with only two scores above 100. So he's got consistency. He's always going to score well enough. He doesn't really have many awful games, but he doesn't have many huge games either to help boost up that average.
No, and that is the thing.
And that's what we're looking for this year.
Yeah, because he is such a contested player, he gets a lot more extraction of the ball, which generally means handballs rather than kicks. While he does get on the end of some link-up chains of the Giants, he's certainly not slow by any means, but he doesn't have the run and dash that Dylan Shiel has into the side, and with Whitfield likely to move back to the wing. That's what we saw take place once Zach Williams moved back into the side last year. Yes, there's the vacancy of a Tom Scully in the midfield unit as well. He's not an outside runner. He's an inside bull who does have a little bit of speed from the start, but you need him to go 100 plus. He can do it, and it wouldn't surprise me if someone said at the end of the year, Hopper averaged 102, 103. I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense to me. But if someone also said, look, he increased his average, natural development, extra responsibility, went into the early to the mid-90s, I'd also go, that makes sense for me. So in a Supercoach and in a Dream Team sense, he makes it very difficult to go there. I'd need to see that in the JLT, and that's what we need to for almost any player that we're picking in our side. We need to see something in the JLT to convince me otherwise that he's a better option than these cheaper players who could offer the same scoring potential. In AFL Fantasy, a little different. I don't mind picking a guy at M6, M7, M8, maybe not that low, but it's got a potential to add a couple of 90s, a couple of tons early on, make me money and bank me some points on the way. So I'm certainly not ruling him out of contention in AFL Fantasy, but again, he's in that same difficult spot where there's players cheaper than him who could and have scored more than him in the past, but there's definitely possibilities with Jacob Hopper.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's got to be a watch list at this point. But the tricky part too with the JLT is that as we've said all along over a number of years now, it's roll over points.
Yeah.
And so the points aren't going to tell us too much about what he's going to do this year. It's going to be the roll, but for a player like him, that can change fairly quickly as well. He's a tough one to try and pick there, I think.
Yeah, look, I certainly think he is, and that's why he makes the 50 most relevant in a relatively low spot, because the potential's there to be a premium. No mistake. If anyone goes, there's no way he's going to be a premium. No, look at the numbers, look at what he's done at all of the levels, look at the opportunities in the midfield. The potential's there. So he's relevant because he could go 100 and become a really nice M8 for you that you basically spend 80 on an average points for. But I'm just not sold yet. Let's talk about drafts, though. At his current average, he's someone that without any improvement, and he will get some natural improvement, he's probably someone that you'd be able to pick up as your last on-field midfielder, assuming you're running a midfield of 7 players, maybe even as an emergency, if you're lucky.
I'm not sure. I think if you can snag him as one of your last 1 or 2 mids, I think you're doing extraordinarily.
You reckon he's going earlier?
Or you're in a very small draft. If you're in a 10 or 12 coach league, I think you're going to end up with him in that sort of middle range because people will see that potential that he's got. The place where a guy like Hopper is going, I think a young gun like that, where we all know he's got that potential. You look at it, there were only about 23, 24 mids last year that went at 100 plus.
Correct.
And we think, in a 10-coach league even, in the first 5 rounds, those guys are all gone.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So at that point, you're looking at guys who are averaged in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Hopper averaged less than that, but we all think he's probably going to do that this year. And so when you're looking in that sort of 6th to maybe 12th round at most, when players like your Trent Cotchins, for example, who are going at 90s these days, and your Dylan Shiels even, who he's replacing, those are the sort of players that you're looking at and you go, do I pick him or do I pick Hopper, who's probably going to do the same, but maybe he'll go better. I think, that's probably where he's going to be. And if you end up with him as your 5th mid, I think that's probably about the sort of mark that a guy like that is going to go. Because if you're waiting to get him at your last mid, someone will jump on him beforehand, I think.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Is where his average point right now makes him your last on-field midfielder. Where his potential is to get him, you are going to have to go for him as your M5.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe even M4 if you're a little extra bullish to make sure you get him. And sometimes you do need to jump early to get the player you really want. But I think where his average point is, he's a last on-field midfielder. If you want him, he's going to need to be picked as your M5. Otherwise, you're probably going to miss him.
Yeah, comfortably. Yep.
So
would agree with that. And in a keeper league, if you've got him, you're not letting him go for anything much at this point.
No.
And if you don't have him, good luck trying to get him. He's one of those players because he's a name, and because he's got that prestige about him. Again, we all know he's going to do better than he's done before. He's got that potential. He's shown it in all the formats and in all levels of footy so far. He's got that potential. So anyone who does own him, if that's not you, you're going to have to pay overs to get him out. He's a tough one to try and land at this point, but if you can do it, absolutely go for it. I'd certainly be making an inquiry.
Oh, yeah, make an inquiry. Chances of you getting him out of someone, look, you don't know, maybe they're a little bit sick of the 80 average and will want a name that's a little bit older. Maybe you'll get lucky, and also maybe that's the kind of coach that everybody wants in their keeper league that just happily give away young guns.
Maybe that coach has got a forward line full of midfielders and desperately needs a forward to swap him for. Who knows, you might get lucky. But
yeah, exactly right. You just never
swapping him for one 80-point mid for another 80-point mid is not going to happen.
Yeah, not a chance in the world in a keeper league. Thank you, Jimmy, for your thoughts today on Jacob Hopper.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me again.
Mate, any time. Of course, if you want to go and check out the articles and all the links to the podcasts for the players revealed thus far in the 50 most relevant, you can at coachespanel.tv. All the links to join our Patreon and get early access to these podcast episodes also at coachespanel.tv. For some, a controversial start so far in the opening 5 or 6 players of the 50 most relevant, and I don't mind that whatsoever. This preseason and every preseason is all about starting the conversation and loving hearing your thoughts via Twitter, Facebook, and all our social handles of your thoughts of these players so far in the 50 most relevant. We head into the early 40s tomorrow, and we'll keep the breakout theme going. But which potential breakout am I talking about?